Hello everyone, this is Food is a Conversation Alumni Edition, session 76. We are featuring our ecosystem members who attended any of the educational program organized by the Future Food Institute so far, let it be summer schools or the program, or now the Food and Climate Shaper Bootcamps, what we co-organize with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. That was a long word I had to say until the very end. Hi, Nicole.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good. I just quickly finish with the intro and we can go on with the questions
Sure.
and the conversation. So twice a week we introduce you one of our alumni, and they are telling you how did they end up in the ecosystem, what was their experience in the educational program, and what are the actions what they are taking towards better food future, a more sustainable food future, and fighting climate change. So it's a very casual conversation. I hope you will enjoy it. If you have any questions, please feel free to post it in the chat. We will make sure we can accommodate. And if you cannot stay with us until the very end, don't worry. We always post it on IGTV, and also we have a dedicated playlist on YouTube where you can watch all the previous sessions as well, all the 75 of it. And I can tell you we have many more to come because we run these boot camps and educational programs on a regular basis, so I will never run out of people to feature. So now, without any further ado, I would like to hand over. Nicole, please introduce yourself. Tell us where you are dialing in from and how did you end up on the Digital Bootcamp on the last edition, actually, which finished on the 12th of April.
Yeah. Hey, Julia. It's good to see you again and chat with you. We're actually located in the same city, well, usually in Berlin, although we're both transplants. So I am originally from the United States. My family is originally from Argentina. So I have dual nationality, and now I'm here in Berlin, which is a really exciting city to be in, actually, as a multicultural immigrant, because it's just a huge, diverse mix of people here and lots of politically active people, and maybe we'll get to that later in the interview. But yeah, I came here actually to study for my master's program. There's a Master of Science program here at Humboldt University, which is one of the three big universities, public universities here in Berlin. And the program is Integrated Natural Resource Management. So it's about environmental science, but it's from an interdisciplinary approach. So, and we can take it as students into any direction we want to go in. And I've always been fascinated with food systems. And so I took it in that direction. And I was really interested in social sciences. So I took it more in that direction. So yeah, and I just finished a couple of months ago. And in the meantime, I saw this Future Food Institute program pop up. And I thought I would participate. I think maybe, yeah, should I talk about how I found?
What was that experience after coming from a very, well, let's say, a traditional educational context, just finishing and graduating, jumping onto a digital, hybrid, part-time, multidisciplinary course? How was that experience for you?
Yeah. I was really curious to find out what it would be like, because coming from but actually it's coming from traditional academia, or from a master's program at least. I think what I found in most academic endeavors is, and actually probably like most things in life, it is what you make of it. It is what you make of it. So the boot camp, it's also what you make of it. So and I know that there are a lot of people that participate in the boot camp that have really specific areas of knowledge, and then others are much more generalist, and others are really new to the topic. So each person brings in that knowledge and that energy, and they contribute in the way that they can in the boot camp. And I was curious because the boot camp is about innovation in the food system. And in my last year in the master's program, I was working on my thesis, which actually I delved into gender theory for. So for a year, I was really deep in gender theory, and I'd kind of distanced myself from the food system and definitely from food system innovation. So I was really curious. And also in the food system, there's kind of a debate about what innovation we need, actually, and what innovation is really. There's a whole side of the argument that's like all for technological innovation, right? And then another side of the argument says, well, what is technology actually? Could it just be knowledge systems, or does it have to be some digital solution? So that was the kind of the debate that I actually wanted to dive into with the Future Food Institute and see how the Future Food Institute was dealing with those kinds of challenges in the food system.
So, how were the findings your expectation, first of all? Second, how were the different activities because we had very diverse things you had to go through over the 4 weeks. What were maybe the highlights, or what do you think could be, improved even?
Yeah, I think boot camp is the correct term for the program, because it is intense. The amount of information that's available to you as a participant in the boot camp is huge. And so everything from sustainable ocean systems to sustainable kitchens, right? And so that was really comprehensive, and I was really happy. I did all the readings and like supplementary readings, and then there was even one of the greatest parts that I think I wish was advertised a bit more, but there's access to the FAO e-learning academy, which is just a wealth of knowledge on sustainable food system design and food chain design, supply chain design, and what agroecology means, like all of so much information there that's available to all of the boot camp students during the boot camp, and then forevermore afterwards. So it's a huge perk of the boot camp. I was really excited about that. And then something else I think I want to highlight too, just because we're here together talking about the boot camp, some of the assignments. So I really actually liked the ecosystem map that we did, because I never thought about my network as an ecosystem. And I really liked that comparison coming from the environmental sciences. So it was really nice to look at, okay, what connections do I have, and who do they know? And the first week, I didn't have very many people on that ecosystem map. And then the second week, as I started talking to all the different lecturers that were at the boot camp, I started broadening my expectations about what kind of connections I could make in my own city here. So that was really exciting to watch as my ecosystem map expanded throughout the boot camp. And then the boot camp takes it one step further and forces you to engage with those players in your ecosystem map. So we have the local discoveries, which are an interview that we have to have with someone in our local community that's a food and climate shaper. So that doing like in an Instagram live method like this. So that was really fun to do. And then also the climate supper, where we sit down for a long form, more like, for me, it was more like a fireside chat with 2 community activists here in Berlin in the food scene. So yeah, that was really fun to be able to engage in person digitally through the boot camp.
Yes, you have to know that I had the privilege to actually get some of Nicole's brownies delivered to my doorstep for the climate supper, but I am forever grateful for. And I know that your conversation for the climate supper was about how the future of food is female. So if you have maybe 1 or 2 lines, what you think were the main outcomes for you personally from this conversation, would you want to share maybe?
Oh my God, yes. So again, I delved into gender theory for my master's thesis, and I was looking actually at masculinity, which is something that I think is very little studied. We talk about in gender theory, or people, when they hear gender, they often equate that with women or feminine or the female. But actually gender is a construction. It is what society decides to make it. And so, and that's constantly changing, that idea. And so we were talking about actually masculinity and contemporary constructions of masculinity. And specifically because my research was on meatless diets, men who decide not to eat meat or who'd reduce meat in their diets, and their masculine constructions, like how they actually practice those meatless diets and what that actually means to them as men. Because masculinity has been really closely tied to meat consumption, and meat is seen as this really symbol of manhood, and lots of men eat meat kind of to demonstrate manhood. So what does it look like when there is no meat? How do men demonstrate manhood some other way? And it was interesting because we talked about previous research that shows how in the United States especially, men who are vegan or vegetarian really masculinize their diets. They try to imbue like these vegetables with this like strength and virility and like power that comes from like vegetables, which is totally different from many actually eco-feminist vegetarians and vegans who connect the exploitation in the food system of marginalized communities, like immigrant communities that work in often really precarious working conditions, like in slaughterhouses or farm workers, and animals in these industrial animal agriculture operations or CAFOs. And that's kind of, those kinds of connections are generally the ones that women make in the United States. And I thought, okay, there's got to be a difference here in Berlin, because Berlin is a very unique place. There's a lot of political activism here. The feminist movement is huge here. The LGBTQ movement is huge here. And the environmental movement too. It's one of the places with the most activism around the environmental movement and the climate crisis in the world. So my thesis was, okay, there must be something different happening around here. And I did find that there are actually, surprisingly, neo-Nazi vegans. So this was a really, new area of research that was also new to the two girls that were in the climate supper too. And it's, again, men who take this veganism or this meatless diet and they imbue it with this meaning of power and superiority, importantly. The idea that that diet gives you some sort of moral purity and superiority to others who don't follow that diet. And there's a lot of white nationalism tied up with that too, amongst these groups. So we started talking about that and started talking about like, what are the origins of these ideas? And we kind of got caught there, which I wish we'd actually talked a bit more about the results of my study, which showed something different. I interviewed 18 young men here in Berlin, and I did want to look at young men, because I saw that most of these other studies looked at older men or all throughout the age spectrum, but I was really curious about what the next generation of men looks like and what contemporary constructions of masculinity.
Young, what do you mean by young?
That's a good question. I let men decide what they considered to be young.
Okay.
So I think the oldest participant was 39.
Okay.
To give you an idea, but the youngest was 21.
Okay.
Yeah, so quite a broad spectrum, like Gen Z and millennials in there. But I still consider that to be young. And
of course.
Yeah. And this group, what was really promising was to see that this group really, I think the best way I would describe it was they imbued their diet practices with care. And I think care is this key word. Like, instead of superiority, instead of manhood, instead of strength and power and virility, they were looking at actually how their diets are practiced in a way that ultimately leads to care for the planet, care for, food sovereignty and other people's access to food around the world, care towards the animals that are trapped in industrial animal agriculture, and also care for their own health, care for the health of their families, care for the health of their partners. And this wasn't just like ideas, but it was actually in practice. And so they were actually cooking a lot every day. Yeah. And it was not like in many like Western cultures, when men cook, it's like this idea of, oh, it's a special occasion, or I'm like treating people to this special meal, like the barbecue on the weekend. Especially in my culture in Argentina, the barbecuer is always the man. And it's like the only day he cooks in the whole week, and it's the weekend. And when he brings in his food, it's like, applause for the barbecuer. Whoa, he's so great. It's like, no, you have to eat 3 times a day, every day. And who usually does that work? Women. And do they ever get an applause? No. Right? And so these young men are doing that work, that domestic work of everyday cooking labor, and they don't see it as something that that requires praise. They see it, actually, for them, it was really equated to being an adult. They're like, actually, we need to learn how to cook just to provide for ourselves and for our families. Like, this isn't odd. This isn't strange. This is just normal. And I thought that was really promising. And I think that has a lot to do with Berlin. It has a lot to do with having access to feminist movements. It has a lot to do with having access to environmental movements. And so I think all of that should grow. And I think something else that's really important is gender equality. So if you look at like the gender gap around the world, what kind of policies and social structures exist that create this difference between the access that men and women have in society. Berlin and many Nordic countries, Sweden, Iceland, have the smallest gender gap. And here, one of the huge benefits of being in these kind of Northern European countries is the paid time off that's given to parents. And that, in Germany, what could be improved actually is requiring parental leave, requiring fathers to take time off when they have children or when they adopt children. Here, it's actually only optional in Germany, and many men choose not to take time off still. And that is really important to change in society, especially in the United States, where we don't have any paid time off. We don't have any support for parents. It's actually really difficult for men and women to have children. But it's an opportunity to care. And again, I think care is really key, though not every man wants to be a father, not every woman wants to be a mother. So another opportunity to care is through food. And so that's why I was really interested in diets, and particularly in plant-based or meatless diets as another opportunity to care.
Yeah, I think it's very kind of ties or relates to one of the findings of research we did about nutrition inequalities. What you said, that in Berlin, people have access to all of these movements, they hear more about it. So it's not only about education, but also communication. And so if you are in an environment where there is no conversation going on around these topics, why would you know? Yeah. So my question, and I'm just putting it out there, to think about maybe how can we create and force these conversations to happen also in environments which are not Berlin, which are not as diverse as Berlin. Mm-hmm. And I think this is what we need to consider, and I really hope that our climate shapers can start these conversations in their own communities. So talking about communities and actions, how do you see your role as a climate shaper in your local community, in this case, Berlin?
Yes. Can I actually just quickly answer that rhetorical question?
Sure.
Something that's really on my mind right now about what societies can do to actually elevate these issues of climate justice and environmental justice. And I think really the number one thing that needs to be done right away is to declare a climate emergency. And that's something that the United States has not done, even though they led this big climate summit, last week and invited world leaders to talk about their big climate pledges. They still haven't declared a climate emergency. And doing that will actually open up funding lines and will require different governmental institutions to consider climate and consider these issues of justice. Without that big, overarching declaration, we won't be able to expand the audience of who's thinking about these issues and expand the opportunities to bring these issues up. So I think that's a huge step that policymakers should take. Yeah, but obviously there are a million things that we could be doing. I just often take the policy route because it's so swift.
That's okay. We should actually point those things out. So thank you for this.
Sorry, can you repeat your question?
Of course, no problem. So my question was how you as a climate shaper are taking action and taking your piece of work in your community.
Oh, I wish I could do more. I often feel like, because the first thing that I do is educate myself. Because I'm a really curious person, first of all. I want to know, I need to know all the things. And so I study, and that's why I did this master's program. And every day I'm studying and I'm reading articles and reading papers and academic reports. But yeah, I'm looking for my next opportunity. So I've already graduated. I'm looking for my next big move. And while I do that, I write sometimes on a blog, this Eat.Repeat, and it's somewhere where I share recipes also, because I think it's a really nice way to engage with people on a day-to-day basis about, the future. We talk about the future of food, And oftentimes people think it's like, people think of labs, right? Or people think of like the impossible burger. But to me, that's not the future of food. To me, the future of food is like this really diverse table, and the people around the table are diverse, and the food that's on the table is diverse. You know, there's biodiversity in the crops that are there represented, and that's what I kind of want to show in recipes. And it's not difficult. It's like, doesn't have to be expensive, and it doesn't require a lot of labor, because a lot of people say, I don't have time, or I don't have money to eat more vegetables, right? But it's a myth. That's actually a myth. It really doesn't take a lot of effort or money to cook more vegetables, to cook more beans. A lot of them come pre-prepared, like canned beans. They're so easy to cook. So I try and share a recipe, and then share my opinions, because I have many, as you can tell, on the food system.
Very good, very good. So this is your way of starting the conversation. So that's one action, and then maybe through reading your blog, other people can take other actions on their plates or in their food choices. So I think you kind of shared already how you see the future of food. But so if we would need to define and picture the preferred food future, what you have, how would that look like?
Yeah. So the title of that climate supper that I had was "The Future of Food is Feminist." And it's this idea of equality of opportunity, and an equality to have power and sovereignty over the food that we eat and the food that we grow. And so what does that mean in practical terms? That's really two things, I think. Two things. First thing is food sovereignty or food democracy, and making sure that farmers, smallholder farmers, have access and power over the foods that they are growing and how they're growing it. And then two, the citizens, the consumers. So producers and consumers both have adequate access to resources to be able to grow the food that's culturally appropriate in a manner that is environmentally sustainable and that's tasty and delicious. Like that's not this, you know, it's not asking for too much, really. I think it's a human right. So that's food sovereignty. And then two, this, you know, just sustainable food future really needs to center around principles of agroecology. So this idea of looking at ecosystem health and what makes an ecosystem healthy, and using those lessons in agriculture. And there's so much that we can do, so many practices that can be implemented that do not require expensive technologies. And that's huge. That's huge. And yeah, I guess that's what I would say. What a feminist food future looks like is agroecological and imbued with food sovereignty.
Sounds good to me. So let's make sure that we are taking the right steps towards reaching this future. Maybe combining with the other food futures explained in the previous conversations as well. There are definitely overlaps, and I think we can all take our own part of this action. Nicole, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today. For the audience, if you didn't manage to listen from the beginning, don't worry, it will be posted directly on IGTV, and you will be able to watch it in your free time. And stay tuned, because we have our next conversation coming up on Thursday. And in the meanwhile, just watch the other 75 conversation as well. We have a lot of content, a lot of opinions, a lot of different insights from different cultures and parts of the world. And so thank you everyone for this evening session. Great way for me to close my day. Thank you, Nicole. We stay in touch.
Thanks. Thank you for the invite, Julia. Have a good evening.
You too. Bye.
Bye.